Well. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Ben. How are you this fine and very wet up here anyway evening? Quite appropriate for the subject matter we
Indeed,
have at
it is.
hand.
Indeed, it is. Yeah, I'm absolutely. Well, my head's a little bit wavy, but other than that, I'm okay. So once again, we are going down the rabbit hole, isn't that right, my friend?
Head first.
Head first.
Yes, head first. Good evening, John. Good evening, Ben. Good evening, listeners.
Good evening, Ed.
I was about to give you a really nice.
He was going to introduce you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. I keep doing this, don't I?
Spoiled it.
I was going to say, we're here with the one, the only, the wonderful, the enigma that is Ed the Techie. But in you came. Yes, it's all good.
Oh, I missed that.
He just can't hold back, can he?
No,
I'm an eager beaver. Always have been. Sorry about that, but thank you very much for the nice intro that I completely ruined.
No,
He's gone off prematurely.
It's someone's going to be disappointed in the morning, that's for sure. Well, with that, John, would you like to introduce the show properly?
I'd like to welcome everyone to this special episode of Down the Rabbit Hole with Ed the Techie, where we delve into the intricacies of the Titanic conspiracy. Was it a Titanic conspiracy, Ed?
Well, that's the first big question, because pretty much everything you know or you thought you know about the Titanic is wrong, because we think that they set sail, and here are a couple of the little posters that they did, and it's all hunky-dory, get on this shit. But everything that people think they know about the Titanic comes from this book and a film of the same name by a chap called Walter Lord. And yeah, so he was OSS and most likely CIA to whatever extent, because you never really leave those sorts of organizations. Book was written 40 years after the fact, and that's the legend. But it's all bullshit, as I've been discovering.
Don't sugarcoat it now, Ed.
No, I don't do sugarcoating. No, sugar's bad for you anyway. But we'll go through it, because there's just so much. I mean, I won't. It's also one of those stories that jumps around.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
So before we do get started, if you are watching over on YouTube, thank you very much. We ask that you please leave a like on the show and give it a share. And anything else we would like you to do, we will ask you later. But with that, please, let's get into it,
Ed. Cool. Right, so yeah, I mean, we'll just start off with a couple of pictures. That's the last picture of the Titanic leaving Ireland, I think.
Or was
so it set sail from Merseyside, didn't it?
It set sail from Southampton, and then it went to Cherbourg in France.
All right, so
and then it went to Queenstown.
It didn't leave from Liverpool, no.
No, it didn't leave from Liverpool. It was commissioned in Belfast.
Okay.
And it then sailed to Southampton, and then from Southampton to Cherbourg.
Yep.
From Cherbourg to Queenstown in Ireland, and that was the last port of call. But the vast majority of the passengers boarded in Southampton. Just to give people a flavour of some passengers' last meals, if you're in first class, it looked absolutely lovely, lobsters and steak. Second class doesn't look too bad either. And the third class probably got all the leftovers of what
the third class got the gruel. They got the slop.
And possibly a few bits of bacon thrown at them or something.
I don't think they got bacon. No.
But the conspiracy actually
those ships look very similar.
They do. And this is where the conspiracy and the rabbit hole really starts, because Titanic was actually the second biggest, most unsinkable ship in the world. The first sister ship, because the class of ship was called the Olympic, and the class is always named after the first ship. And the Olympic was the first of the three ships. Basically, J.P. Morgan commissioned 3 big ships because he wanted to try and win the luxury market, because they were all about speed. It was all about get them in, pack them in, get them over the Atlantic as quick as possible and be done. And he was like, well, it takes a whole lot of time, so let's try and capture the luxury market. So he commissioned the 3 liners, Olympic, Titanic, and they were going to call the third one Gigantic, but then
It was
that
Britannic,
was changed.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was renamed to Britannic. I'm not sure why they changed the name. So the Olympic was actually the first of the ships that was launched. And one of the things that people might not have heard about is any of the same fanfare going back to the where are we there? Those leaflets, the sailing of the Titanic was a massive deal. And they were promoting it like crazy. The Olympic received hardly any fanfare at all. Now, you've just spent loads of money building 3 ships. Why would you not make a big deal about the first one?
Was there not a problem with the Olympic though?
There was the Olympic was one of those ships that sailors probably dread finding out that they're being sent out on the Olympic, because it was really, really unlucky. And we can go into some more detail. I think I've actually kind of got the slides a bit jumbled up, but let's start with the Olympic. It was almost identical to Titanic. The differences were around the front part of basically underneath the bridge. There was a little section there where on Olympic it was left open, and on Titanic they closed it off so that the first class passengers could stroll around on deck without having to interact with any second class riffraff.
So because of snobbery is what you're saying here.
Yeah, basically. And the problem, the biggest of the problems that the Olympic had was a collision with HMS Hawke.
Yep.
Which was a Royal Navy dreadnought, which at the time, rather unfortunately, were equipped with battering rams. Along the keel.
2 very large ships hitting each other.
And so essentially, HMS Hawke, and they were in a channel, and the blame of the incident was given to the crew of the Titanic.
The Olympic. The
Olympic, yes, we should say the Olympic. Sorry, once you start investigating these, the names get so confusing. But just for people's reference, we'll try to stick with the names of the ships as they were launched. So the Olympic is the first ship, and the Titanic is the second, and we'll talk about the switch in a bit. But the damage that was sustained by the Olympic after this hit from the Hawke was really serious, and it also damaged the Hawke quite seriously as well, which was the first problem, because the Royal Navy Commission, essentially this is the time when Britannia still ruled the waves and the Royal Navy was ridiculously powerful, and they just blamed everything on the White Star crew, even though it's there are questions about whose fault it was. But the damage was severe enough that it took them weeks and weeks before they could get her seaworthy enough to sail her to Belfast.
Okay.
And you can see in that picture that the damage was towards the stern of the ship.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the rear end. And basically what I think they discovered was a problem with the keel. And once you bend the keel of a ship, you're done. It's going to basically be cheaper to turn it into scrap and build a new ship out of the scrap.
Yeah.
But the insurance isn't going to pay out because it was their fault.
Yeah, precisely.
Well, exactly.
Not just that, because they were found liable for the damage to the Hawke.
Yep.
JP Morgan, and through him, the White Star Line, or the White Star Line, and through them, JP Morgan, was liable for not one ship but two ships.
Yeah.
And So there was a lot of money on the line. And that's essentially where the first part of the conspiracy comes in.
Okay.
Which is the insurance fraud, which also makes me think about a certain couple of buildings in New York that had a bit of an asbestos problem that they couldn't solve.
A lot of insurance fraud certainly goes ahead. I'll give you an example. Hastings Pier, a day before it was due to move from private ownership to public ownership, went up in flames. Definitely wasn't an insurance job, was it?
We had the same issue here in Brighton with the West Pier.
Yeah,
they were starting to get that going, and then suddenly, magically, it just catches fire.
It's on fire again.
And so, there was reports of a small boat scene nearby, but that's a conspiracy theory.
So does this put Olympic and Titanic? Wait, I take it Titanic is under construction at this point.
Yes, Olympic was launched first. This is one of the only two pictures of one of the only pictures I could find of the two ships together in dry dock.
Right. So this would then, if the Olympic had to go back to Belfast for repair, would that mean it was back in dry dock?
Yes,
alongside the Titanic.
Yes, they even scavenged parts from the Titanic that they didn't have spares and they couldn't build spares in time. Right. And the two ships that they were completing the Titanic. This was the second time because when they were built before Olympic's ill-fated maiden voyage, because she didn't just hit the
no, she didn't, did she?
The Hawk.
Did she not hit rocks somewhere as well?
Yeah, she hit a rock just off the coast of Ireland. Yeah. She also nearly chewed up a tugboat in New York in the propeller wash.
And was there something to do with a coal ship as well? No? Or am I thinking something else?
No, that one I didn't come across.
Right, okay.
So essentially it would have been feasible to switch the two ships for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Belfast dock workers who have family stories handed down to them.
Right.
Of grandfathers and great grandfathers.
Yeah.
Who knew about it and they were working on it, and it took a period that I think they did the final switch of lifeboats and stuff over the course of a weekend with about 30 men.
Right.
But there were a lot of people working on it and they were all sworn to secrecy. They were told that if you ever breathe a word of this, you'll never work and your families will never work. And this is in the time before Social Security. So they're essentially saying, we're going to kill your whole family.
Well, yeah.
And it provides a motive to whoever owned the ships to get the ship that was damaged, Olympic, into as enough of a state that she was seaworthy for one voyage, and then arrange for something to happen on that voyage which put her on the bottom of the sea, thereby allowing you to claim insurance on the ship. And also in the weeks before Titanic set sail, the insurance was massively increased to something like twice of what the vessel was worth.
Not a red flag at all. Not a red flag at all.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just when you think about it now, it's hard to imagine that people fell for it. But I mean, I think that in 100 years' time, people will look back at this period and think, how the hell did they all fall for that one? Come on.
Yeah.
Or how did most of them fall for it?
Yeah. Well, people are going to look back on this time period as an embarrassment to the human race.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, just to give a quick rundown of some of the stuff that I want to talk about, and I've got some slides for and stuff like that. The first thing I mentioned already, why was there no fanfare when the Olympics set sail? What not a lot of people know is that there was actually a coal strike at the time, and it was very, very difficult. There were a lot of ships laid up.
Yeah.
And there were also passengers wanting to go across to New York. And also
was there not a coal fire in one of the bunkers?
Yes, there was a coal, and
that wasn't a coal ship. There was a coal fire in the bunker.
Yeah, they had a coal fire in one of the bunkers, and they never put it out, and the ship shouldn't really have set sail. but they did.
You can't really put it out unless you empty the entire bunker, and these things are massive, aren't they?
Absolutely, and there are so many aspects to this story that it makes staying on a particular thread, particularly for like a podcast like this, it's actually really difficult because you have to jump around a lot because there's a lot of stuff going on. In terms of the motivation of why someone would want the Titanic to be brought down, the big one is insurance. They can get a big payout, pay the Royal Navy off, sort their own ship out. Bob's your uncle.
Absolutely.
And they've still got they've still got a perfectly serviceable ship sailing about called the Olympic now.
Yes, absolutely. And that particular ship went on to sail for 25 years. I think it was scrapped in the late 30s, about 2 years before the start of the Second World War.
And strangely enough, for such an unlucky ship at the start of its life, it didn't have any other incidents, did it?
Given the nature of the damage, where they spent weeks trying to fix her in Southampton, and then she limped to Belfast, and they swapped because of the incident in New York. They needed a new propeller,
right?
And so they swapped one of the propellers of the other ship that was under construction, which at the time was called Titanic, and this is before the name switch. And it's one of the things that people debunking the conspiracy theory always say. It's because, we've been down to the Titanic's wreck and there's a propeller and you can see the number 401 on there, and that's the Titanic, so it must have been the Titanic. And they don't take into account this incident in New York and the fact that the propellers were swapped.
Well, that's good information.
Then there's the other big who benefits and who has a motive, which was that at the time, JP Morgan and his other banker friends were trying to create the Federal Reserve, which is, I mean, the creation of the Federal Reserve was absolutely essential for everything that's happened since World War I, World War II, Vietnam, 9/11,
and just
all of it.
Just to let people know, the Federal Reserve is a private bank. It's nothing to do with the government.
Nope.
It's a completely private thing.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, it completely contravenes the U.S. Constitution, because the founding fathers of the U.S. gave Congress the ability to create money, and that was done deliberately, so you wouldn't end up with bloody bankers turning you into slaves, which is what's happening now.
Well, absolutely.
But there were three people who
were, shall we say, constitutionalists.
Well, Astor, Strauss, and Guggenheim, they were actually. It's a mistake to think that they were against the Federal Reserve because of any kind of altruistic motives. The simple fact is that those three families made their money in commodities and actual real things, and JP Morgan was a financier who just made money out of money. And the whole point of the Federal Reserve, these three knew that the Federal Reserve was having a Federal Reserve system was going to generate inflation. What's happening at the moment? Massive inflation. And quite simply, it was going to make them poorer, because it was going to reduce the value of their assets in real terms, and that was effectively why they were against it. But JP Morgan convinced them to go on the Titanic, and originally he was actually scheduled to be on it as well.
He was,
and he pulled out at the last moment.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Something maybe Elon Musk should have done with Amber Heard.
Yeah, well, he claimed to be ill and too unwell to make the voyage, and then he was seen 2 or 3 days later in a spa resort in France somewhere, looking really perky and happy and not sick at all.
I bet he was. The payday was incoming at this point, wasn't it?
Well, at this point, his ship had sank, hadn't
it? The payday is incoming.
Yeah,
absolutely. So essentially, I think that was one of the reasons there was such a big fanfare, because JP Morgan wanted it to make it a big deal, because then he could convince these 3 guys. And he probably said, look, guys, let's go on the ship. We can have a nice, luxurious voyage to England. You can enjoy my new ship, and we can talk about all this stuff, and we can figure a way through this like gentlemen or some BS. And so, yeah, these 3 guys didn't come off the Titanic. And I'm personally of the opinion now that they didn't just drown, that they were assassinated in some way, or I don't know, chained up in a cabin.
Very easy to cover up.
Yeah.
Very easy to cover up. And it was essential. I think it was an essential part of JP Morgan's plan that these 3 never came off that ship again.
Women and children first, and we don't have enough lifeboats for the men.
Well, yeah, the lifeboats. I mean, not enough lifeboats is the common thing, and there weren't any lifeboats on it.
But they did send them away, only partially filled.
Well, that's one of the other bits of weird shit that I've got written down on my list. And when we're talking about lifeboats, as I said, we do have to necessarily jump around quite a lot.
Yeah.
The lifeboats are a rabbit hole as well, because not only were there not enough of them, but when the Carpathia brought the surviving passengers and the lifeboats back to New York, the first thing it did was it offloaded the lifeboats. Never mind the traumatized passengers that have just watched friends and family die a horrible drowning death. No, we have to offload the lifeboats. The other thing was that they weren't all identical. It didn't seem to onlookers like they'd all come off the same ship, and the Titanic's lifeboats were all exactly the same.
And the Carpathia itself wasn't in the right position, was it?
Well, this is one of the things people think, because of the films and because of the book, people have this impression of the Titanic being all alone out in the middle of the North Atlantic with no one around, and everyone just dies a horrible, murderous, drowning death. And actually, there were other ships in the area,
right?
And some of those ships were loitering about for a suspiciously long time.
Yeah, and well, the Californian is the one that really raises eyebrows, because it left Southampton 5 days before the Titanic set sail, and the Californian was roughly half the speed of the Titanic. So for the Californian to get somewhere and for the Titanic to get there, it would have to set sail roughly twice as long as the Titanic. It would have to sail for roughly twice as long as the Titanic, so it'd have to leave a lot sooner.
Yeah. So what was the Titanic's average journey time? Was it around about 8-9 days?
No, less than that. I think it was 4 or 5 to get to where it actually sank.
Right.
But going back to the Californian for a minute, that's a really interesting one, because don't forget that there was a coal strike and lots of people trying to get to New York. The Californian set sail almost completely empty. Its only cargo was 3,000 woolen sweaters and 3,000 woolen blankets.
Well, that sounds good to me.
Once the captain of the Californian, I think he's called Stanley Lord, if memory serves, he basically stopped the ship and started drifting with the ice, but he kept the boilers fired, so he didn't, and that's not usual. If a ship stops to drift, then it shuts the engines down to conserve fuel. But he left the boilers stoked. He also, when he retired, he actually slept fully clothed on a sofa in the map room, and he was over 6 foot, and the sofa was 5'7", so it wouldn't have been comfortable at all.
Yeah.
And he told the crew that he wanted to be informed the minute anything strange happens.
I mean, it's just
so there's the Californian.
It's just mighty convenient that we've got all of the blankets and all of the woolly jumpers possibly need for these people to keep them warm once they end up in the icy waters. It's very convenient.
Absolutely, and the Californian was also owned It was owned by a different company, but that company was also owned by International Mercantile Marine, which was the same company that owned the White Star Line, and that was the company that JP Morgan owned.
Yeah.
And so it was not a sister ship, but it was from a sister company.
Yeah, yeah.
There's also the Mount Temple, which you can see just at the bottom of this map.
Yeah.
And that was another interesting one because that was actually outfitted like a hospital ship. And
of course it was.
Yeah, and it had 7 doctors on it.
Oh, how convenient!
And so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just it absolutely beggars belief. So
yeah, there's no doubt at all in my mind that these people weren't supposed to die. I think the majority of the passengers weren't supposed to die because I think there was a problem with exactly where the ships were in relation to each other, and I think that's what caused some of them to be in the water longer than they intended. And alas, poor Jack never got on that door.
I mean,
the ships they were also.
It's right there. It's written down. This door is big enough for 2 of us, or that door was big enough for 2. That bitch. Oh, don't let go, Jack. What do you mean, don't let go? You've seen the size of that thing.
As she prized his fingers off the edge of the door and threw him away into the abyss.
Yep.
Didn't happen.
I'll never let go, Jack.
I'm just gonna
that's actually. Oh no, but it's actually it's also massive fiction because the temperature of the water. Well, not just that, but he shouldn't have clung on to that door for so long because the temperature of the water is -2 degrees Celsius.
Yeah. 20 minutes
and
max.
At that temperature, someone has got about 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Yeah, and also the people that you see in the movie that are jumping off the ship and sliding down the ship and stuff, most of those would likely have been caused by hydrocution, which is where you have this massive temperature change and it just stops your heart dead.
Yeah.
I'd never actually heard that word hydrocution before. It's quite a good one. So there was lots of different ships around. The Samson was an illegal seal hunting ship, and the captain of the Samson only came forward about a year after the disaster because he was doing illegal stuff, basically. And at the time that Titanic was firing multicolored rockets, Samson was firing white rockets. There was no coordination or anything, I don't think. I think that was pure bad luck. But the Samson was firing white rockets to call back the little boats that it sent out to hunt the seals. And when the crew on the Californian's bridge saw rockets, they went to tell the captain, and the captain was asking them, "What color are they?" And they said, "Oh, they're just white." And he's fine. He was like, "Okay, that's
all right then."
So I think that the Californian was absolutely in on it.
Yeah,
but I think JP Morgan is a sneaky bugger, and he told the crews of the ships 2 different things.
Yes.
So that the Californian, because the Californian never saw the multicolored rockets that the Titanic was firing, and if it had done, it would have basically fired up its boilers and gone to help.
Yeah.
And some of the passengers after the fact reported that the crew didn't seem that concerned after the initial whatever it was that hit the ship, because the officers were basically saying that it's okay, the Californian is coming to get us. So I think that the plan was that something bad would happen to the Titanic, the Californian would come and get them, and all of the people would be saved, and that was how JP Morgan and Bruce Ismay sold the whole conspiracy to the officers of the Titanic.
I was going to say at the end of it, make it rain that insurance money. And
pretty much.
They could dance around in the cash for a bit before they have to pay it to the army, but make it
rain. Maybe.
Well, it's the armed forces, John.
So we have the Californian and the Carpathia. The Carpathia was the one that eventually picked all the passengers and the lifeboats up and took them to New York. But one wonders why the California didn't get involved once it realized, because the wireless operator had shut down.
Would that not give the game away if it rushed in, at the last minute?
It could have done. The other thing is there's that picture of. I just need to find the picture of the damage to.
Oh yeah, the rent in the hull.
Yeah,
And
sorry, I'm flicking around here.
Someone 737373 says, read a couple of books, but this is far more interesting. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yes. Right, there's the lifeboats in New York. The other thing that I think is very suspicious is that there are questions about whether Captain Smith went down with the Titanic. And if you wanted to get people off the ship first, dropping the lifeboats off before you drop the passengers off, you get everyone, all the media's attention is on the dock where the passengers are being offloaded.
Yeah.
And you can smuggle. They could have easily smuggled quite a few people in those lifeboats. There's also reports in the Royal Navy admitted it years later that a Royal Navy ship called HMS Sirius was in the area as well.
Yep.
And that brings us to what actually happened to the Titanic, because we've kind of danced around a bit and we've sort of looked at a little bit at who done it and motivations and why it might have been done. But then next is what actually happened. Now, I personally am now of the opinion that it didn't hit an iceberg. I think that if you're going to have a conspiracy, then essentially, if you're going to have a conspiracy, you need something that's a little bit more reliable than a
bit of ice. My God, he's saying it wasn't a plane that flew into the Pentagon.
Oh my God.
Sorry, I'm flicking around. I'm just trying. I've got a picture of the damage. There we go.
Yeah.
That was the damage supposedly done to the ship. Now, that doesn't look to me like an iceberg.
Well,
I'm sorry, but it's.
I'm no what's an ice expert called? But I'm no ice expert, but I actually wouldn't recognise the damage done to a ship by an iceberg.
No, I wouldn't either.
No, that's true. But it's also
That's true.
the reports of it were that the actual width of the gash in the side of the ship was probably only 10 or 12 inches, but it extended 1.5 meters into the damage was 1.5 meters into the ship, and it was just a line, kind of like you can see.
Yeah.
Now, for that sort of if you hit an iceberg, I can expect to see damaged plates. I mean, these ships were all stitched together with rivets. There's no welding or anything at the time. And so you'd see the plates of the ship being bent and rivets popping.
Yep.
And you would get a line, but it would look more like a long, massive dent rather than an actual
it would buckle
gash.
buckle rather than tear, perhaps.
And if you bear in mind that a lot of the particularly military ships had things like battering rams and stuff like that.
Yes. Well, I could testify to that because
there's also
my father was serving on HMS Gurkha during the Cod War when we were trying to dissuade the Icelandic gunboats from taking on our fishing vessels. And at one point, their ship, i.e. the Gurkha, ran alongside Icelandic gunboat known as the Thor.
Okay.
And the Gurkha had stabilizers at the side of it that stick out to stop it rolling. Sorry, am I boring you, Ben?
No.
But one of these stabilizers penetrated into the Gurkha and tore a hole very similar to that along its hull. And it then had to run for port before it sunk.
Yeah. Then I found this tidbit from a guy called Raimondo Vitillo, who was one of the few survivors of the shipwreck of the Titanic, and the story is handed down from to his son, and the father told the story quite a few times, and Carmine said, for all the times my father called back to mind the topic, he never changed his version, not even the smallest detail, because that episode was engraved clearly in his mind. He said he was outside on the deck to get some fresh air. Suddenly he heard 3 ship whistles and then the sound of a huge rumble, and he saw another huge ship passing by. He could not say if its flag was Dutch or Swedish. He never saw an iceberg. When he came back home after the shipwreck, he wrote many letters to the embassy giving his own version of the story about what happened that night on the Titanic, but they never answered him back.
Interesting.
And then there's a little bit further on in that, there's the talk about this yellow funneled steamer, which was seen in the direction of Titanic by officers and crew of the Californian. Then this ties back to the fact that the lifeboats that the Carpathia dropped off in New York didn't all look like they'd come from the same ship. So what if there was a second ship which was deliberately scuttled, i.e., it was some sort of Royal Navy vessel that they didn't need, and they outfitted it so that they could run up against the side of another ship, cause a massive gash in the hull, and sink it? Why would the Royal Navy want to do that? I've got an answer for that.
You do?
Which is that the Royal Navy was directly tied. The British government was completely in on this whole thing, by the way.
It's not like they've ever been in on a conspiracy theory before.
No,
it's not like they believed there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Yeah, yes, or a certain Dr. David Kelly. Let's just not go down.
Well, let's not go down those rabbit holes.
Yeah,
we're already down one at the moment.
Yeah, there's future, but it's a rabbit warren. They're all connected together somehow.
Indeed they are.
But what's interesting is that it would be if another ship was responsible for the damage to Titanic, chances are, to do that much damage to a big ship, you would probably render your own ship either fatally damaged or damaged enough that you wouldn't be able to sail it back to wherever you wanted to go. Yeah. Plus, it's a giant sodding pile of evidence. I mean, that talk about passports lying in the rubble of a fallen building.
Yeah, but then what you have to explain with this is if you're going to scuttle it, if you're going to sink it, where's the wreckage? Because we got enough people go down to Titanic.
Yeah, but hold on. Do you know how deep this is? Where this went down?
Yeah.
Yeah, and how hard it is to find. And then remember the Titanic's huge. If this ship is much smaller, it's going to disappear into the mud.
Yeah, but they could have also sailed it because the Carpathia lingered quite a long time in the area looking for survivors and lifeboats and stuff. So if the crew of this other ship scooted off as far as the ship was able to go based on how much damage it sustained, they then deploy the lifeboats, open the insides of the ship up to the sea, and then abandon ship, and then make their way back to where Carpathia is picking up lifeboats and just pretend you've come off the Titanic and you're passengers. And then when the Carpathia gets to New York, they all hide out on the lifeboats, and the lifeboats get dropped off, and all of the surreptitious people get away, including potentially whoever the assassins were of Guggenheim, Strauss, and Astor, or maybe it was intended that they went down as well. I mean, bear in mind that most of the officers, the only surviving officer was Lightoller, and he must have been in on it because his story. I mean, he gave one set of evidence to the American inquiry. He told the British inquiry something different. And he was really dodgy. Another one this blew my mind when I heard it, but the helmsman of the Titanic, he survived as well, and I can't remember his name, but as soon as they landed in New York, the helmsman was shipped straight off to South Africa, and he became the harbor master in Cape Town. Obviously a bit of a job upgrade from being
like a promotion
ship as well. Yeah. Oh yeah, and the White Star Line was very keen to get all of the surviving officers and crew the hell out of New York as quickly as possible.
Interesting.
And the inquiry itself was a complete cover up. I mean, it makes the 9/11 Commission or the Warren Commission seem like really thorough investigations, because the witnesses were limited to yes and no answers. They weren't allowed to give any context. The presiding judge, or whoever it was constantly leading the witnesses into a particular narrative. And that narrative is of an iceberg and heroic attempts to get everyone off the ship and stuff like that. And I think it was much more brutal than that. There's a scene in the movie Titanic where the officers have barred the third class passengers from coming up to the lifeboat deck. And there's people getting shot. I suspect that there was a lot more of that on that ship than legend would have us believe. So yeah, that's where we go next. We've done the lifeboats. That's HMS Sirius, which was in the area.
Yep.
We got the Titanic. I was trying to find.
So they found the Titanic. They found the wreckage.
Yeah.
Right?
That was also a rabbit hole, by the way. That was actually no. It was actually because I think that they'd known the exact location of the Titanic since the 50s, because there was, and this is further rabbit hole, because the British government was involved in salvage operations in that rough area, and there was reported to be a ridiculous amount of gold on the Titanic, which belonged to the British government, that went down with the ship as well, and that it's that bit is very, very murky.
Well, but if the gold belonged to the British government, where the hell was it going?
Well, that's a good question. That's a very good question, because it would have been. We can take it for granted that the entire city of London wanted the Federal Reserve to be created.
Right. Okay.
And also the British government wanted to be able to use the White Star's ships as troop carriers, because everyone knew there was a war coming.
Yeah.
Because it was being planned by the Milner Group, but that's yet another rabbit hole. But
right,
yeah,
so you could. I can see you've got a picture of the ship there lying on the bottom. Right? Is this an artist's impression, or is this a real picture from James Cameron's?
No, it's a 3D rendering based on sonar data and other measurements taken. So so
tell me, what about the bit of the front that's different from the Olympic?
They changed it before. There was some alterations made.
So they altered both ships.
Yeah, they made changes to the Olympic to make it look more like the Titanic, and they made changes to the Titanic to make it look more like the Olympic. So they also muddled up historical pictures. So when you see two pictures of what they purport to be the Titanic and the Olympic, you can't necessarily be guaranteed which you're looking at, because you can't always see the name on the ship. And I mean, they're old, grainy, black and white pictures. So it's very. I mean, this is one of the reasons why the debunkers go potty every time something like this comes up, and they use things like the propeller and the fact that this is the spec of the Titanic and stuff like that, but they're not taking into account how relatively easy it would have been for drawings to be changed and modifications to be made. And
you would also have to change all the cutlery and the crockery and all that, or was that not branded Titanic? Was that just branded White Star Line?
They're all just White Star Line branding.
Right, okay.
They did. I mean, they put carpets in. There was a whole bunch of changes that they made in absolute secrecy in Belfast, and then essentially over the course of one weekend, they flipped the name, anything that had a name, like the lifeboats and the actual name of the ship and stuff like that. Another interesting one is that the undercoat of paint of the Olympic was different from the Titanic. And in some of the footage underwater, which I haven't been able to find, that's where it's clear enough, supposedly where you can see the paint flaking off the hull, the undercoat for that is grey, not black. But again, that one is, like I said, I haven't got any pictures to back that one up at all. I was trying to find some footage or some underwater pictures showing the the side of the ship, which was supposedly damaged, but very conveniently for everybody, all the debunkers anyway,
fell on that side, didn't it?
Yeah, the entire bow of the ship is completely buried in the mud. So there's absolutely no way of kind of telling anything. And yeah, I personally find, when I first saw this reminds me, sorry, we got sidetracked. James Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
The reports are that they knew where the ship was, and when Cameron was not James Cameron, the other one, the one who worked for Woods Hole. Oh God, what was he called?
Oh yeah, the one that worked for the Oceanographic.
Yeah, he was the one that Bob Ballard. That's the guy.
Yeah, that's
yeah, he was the one that actually supposedly found Titanic, but he was he moonlighted for the CIA and was actually they were actually looking for a Russian sub, and because of the amount of support vessels and stuff they needed, if they'd just been out there for no reason and didn't say anything, the Russians would have said it to you. You look for sub.
Yeah,
it's obvious. Even drunk Russian knows you look for sub. So they basically framed it as they were looking for the Titanic, and oh look, we found the Titanic. So even that's a rabbit hole. But yeah, that first picture when they released it all those years ago, and I was much younger and much more naive than I am now. I remember that initial kind of where they're zooming into the bow of the ship out of the mist, and apart from anything else, Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet aren't there, which is but yeah, so that's pretty much the presentation. I want to give
paint me like one of your French girls, Ed.
Thank you to John Hamer, and if this is not RMS Olympic, wrong author, right title. I've got the picture wrong. This is not the correct book, so let me hang on a minute.
That's Mark Churnside's book.
Wait a minute. Let's just actually pull the right book up. Oh, idiot. It's by John Hamer. And where are we? There we go. That's the one.
RMS Olympic.
Yeah. So if anyone out there is interested in more of what we've been talking about and wants to learn a little bit more about the Titanic rabbit hole,
we should have put up an affiliate link.
I don't have an affiliate link.
No deal, do we? We've missed the trick there, Ben.
I think you're right there, John. I think you're right.
So yeah, that was the Titanic,
and an interesting and fascinating story nonetheless.
Indeed. So in conclusion, we are led to believe from today's presentation that the RMS Titanic was sunk on purpose, was not the Titanic, was indeed its sister ship, the Olympic, and that there was a plot of murder, gold, and thievery.
Yeah. And fun fact.
And there was no iceberg.
Yeah, fun fact. I think one of those funnels is fake. I think the one at the back was fake.
Do you know what?
I think it only had 3 operational funnels.
The Disney cruise liners have funnels, and they're all fake, right?
Yeah.
They're all fake. They're just aesthetic. But I believe you're right. I believe at least one of those funnels was fake. But they are quite aesthetically pleasing, don't you think?
Yes, indeed they are.
I mean, it's a crying shame to sink any ship that looks like that. It looks absolutely wonderful, and I would have probably sailed upon it.
I have sailed across the Atlantic.
I mean, just looking at, if you have a closer look at the first class menu.
Well, I went on my honeymoon from Southampton to New York on the Queen Mary 2, and we didn't go first class, but so the first class was called the Queen's Grill.
Yeah.
And the second class, the one below that, was called the Princess Grill. So we managed to get on the Princess Grill.
So this is
which
back
meant
when
we had a suite.
This was back when you had money, right, John?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it kind of was when we had money, and we saved up for it as well. So,
but speaking of which, If you're
It was lovely.
enjoying this show and you enjoy any of the other shows we do, Monday to Friday, somewhere between 12 and 2 p.m. starting for Chasing Dissent Live, then please consider joining us on patreon.com/Chasing Dissent, subscribestar.com/Chasing Dissent, or Ko-Fi, that's ko-fi.com/Chasing Dissent, and giving us a small donation to keep making these shows and keep the lights on, essentially. We would really, really appreciate your support, and it gives us the ability to make better quality content for you. Now, that content will always be free. Shows like this will always be free, and we're looking to expand. We've got the second channel, 100 Acre Swamp, and we are just looking to expand and bring you enjoyable, fun, entertaining, and thought-provoking content. Sorry, I've not really been myself tonight. I am fighting back a seizure and have been for about 40 minutes. So I hope I've done a good job producing this for you all. And if you've enjoyed it over there on YouTube, don't forget to leave a like. And if you're not already, please indeed subscribe to the channel. We would really, really appreciate that as well. Please do. Anyway, Ed.
Do.
I was just going to say thank you to all my Buy Me a Coffee supporters. And if anyone does fancy buying me a coffee, then you can do so on buymeacoffee.com/edtechie. And I also have a website, codshit.com, where I post artwork and things like that. And actually a new Telegram channel where I'm posting some art that I think Getter and Truth Social are going to censor, which is Ed the Techie's art on Telegram.
Well, hopefully soon we'll all be returning to Twitter. We shall see. On that
front. Yeah, and if you believe that, then
we shall see.
You're going to ship to sell you.
We shall see what the crack is there. I've got 2 Twitter accounts that, if Elon Musk is to be believed, if he is a man of his word, I should be able to reclaim very, very soon. So we shall see. And I think we're all 3 of us sitting here are banned from Twitter.
Yes, I'm on Getter and Truth Social for anyone that wants to follow me.
I mean, what the hell did they ban you for?
Oh, hateful imagery because of
the comedy.
No, it was my profile picture. Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's just the most breathtaking lack of any kind of sense of humor. But I mean, if you're going to pick a emoji like a moai as your stonehead emoji thing, then I don't know, but the thing with I'm in mixed. I've got mixed thoughts about Twitter, because even if Elon says, "Oh yeah, please come back," I don't know. I don't trust him.
Well, the thing is, we were all enticed into Twitter at first, and we were speaking about this afternoon at the time of recording on Chasing Dissent Live. We were all enticed into this platform that called itself the free speech wing of the free speech party. That was its tagline, and then they started censoring us. And is this just a vicious circle? Will they do it to us again? That's the question, isn't it?
And it also keeps us under control. And also how many bots are on there.
I shall share my screen briefly, if I may. And show you a quick picture of me on the Queen Mary.
you can try. I'll see if I can capture it.
Do you think it'll work?
Well, you can try. I'll see if I can capture it. We might not be set up.
There you go.
There you go. Yes, we can see you and your beautiful wife there. We can't see your kilt. But
that's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, but for
John, your wife is really fit.
Yeah, I
know. I mean, just tell us what you really think there, Ed.
Yeah, straight in there, mate.
Yep.
Yes, that was on the Queen Mary. It was Queen Mary 2. It was an interesting and enjoyable time when we had money.
I've never had money, so how the other half did live. And one more thing before you go, just for me personally, just for I am actually going abroad with my kids for the first time in 5 years in 3 days' time. So if you would like to buy me a glass of wine to cope with looking after the little shits abroad, then please feel free to do so, and directly at paypal.me/wheeliebricks. The link is in the chat, and I would really, really appreciate it. Now, I, up until very recently, was teetotal, and I would definitely like to have some French wine to get me through. Going to Disneyland, Ed, with the kids.
That's going to be fun, especially seeing as you're able to skip every single queue.
Yep. Yes, you're too bloody right. Yeah.
It's one of those few times in life where being disabled is actually a real bonus.
Oh, believe me.
We've done whole shows on it.
We have, and believe me, you know, just with the situation that I'm in on a daily basis, I take the queue jumps with a smile on my face. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you're entitled to.
So there we go.
And with that, John, I will start queuing things up.
Indeed. So I'd like to thank you, Ed, for this illuminating and informative presentation of the RMS Titanic, or was it the Olympic?
Oh, well, I think we've established that one.
Yeah.
But everyone has
it's up to you.
We have one more question to answer. What is our next After Dark Down the Rabbit Hole going to be? And I picked the last one, so you guys pick one.
John, I will push it over to you.
Oh, the next one.
That's putting you on the spot, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you've put me on the spot. For some reason, I hadn't given it much thought.
Well, we could do World War One, or we could do something more recent, or we could do something older. Cecil Rhodes is a good rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
We could do Bilderberg. We could do, or Ask in Chat.
Well,
yeah. I'll tell you what
would the listeners like to hear next?
I mean, I was going to say,
us some ideas, listeners.
There's already one in here from Pink Roses on YouTube. It says, that was fascinating. What about the Hindenburg next?
The Hindenburg.
And do you know how Alex is doing, even though he's a very naughty boy?
Wait, what was that? What was the suggestion?
The Hindenburg.
The Hindenburg.
The Hindenburg. That's a good one. I haven't actually even researched that one very much. Okay, let's do the Hindenburg.
If anyone else wants to do something else, wrap it in a tenner and send it our way.
And to answer
largest denomination wins.
To answer the question, from what I understand, Mr. Belfield is actually doing okay in prison at the moment. But... Well,
we've found out he is of a bent that might be receptive to some
now, John,
behaviour.
You'll get the woke police on you next.
No, but he was outed by the judge. Did you not?
He was.
Did you not hear that, Ed?
No.
The judge outed him by the sheriff, as a member of the LGBTQ community.
He said, "You as a member of the LGBTQ community cannot hide behind the fact that you then
made anti-gay statements."
Yeah.
Isn't that like
that's outing someone?
People of a certain
Doxing.
religion spraying swastikas on things, even though they're not Nazis.
And another one for the list there is also something actually I would like to do, which is the Nazi bell, Die Glocke.
Oh, the Glocke.
Die Glocke. That one's to do a whole show on that is
I think you need to,
because there's not that much information about it.
Yeah, but you could also bring in Hangar 18.
Yep.
We could do some of those.
Bring in Roswell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we could do a deeper dive into that section of the UFO stuff.
You could even bring in the Antarctic Nazi base.
I think that's a good idea. Let's do it. We'll do a combined one, but let's do Hindenburg next because I think that could be.
Is there enough in
really
Hindenburg for a whole show?
I have no idea. If there is,
okay.
I will go off and I'll get my research hat on and we'll find out.
He's got a month.
Yeah, okay.
He's got a month.
Yep.
He can come back to us. There's another good one, HARP. And of course, there's always Devon Island. We need to have a look at that and the possibility that is Devon Island really Mars?
There's also geoengineering and there's some stuff to do with the sun, and there's plenty. But let's do Hindenburg next.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Okay. And on that note, right. John, do your thing.
Yes, I'd like to, as I said, I'd like to thank Ed for his excellent presentation, and I'd like to thank you, dear audience, for attending this. And with that, it's good night from me.
Good night from me.
And good night from me.
Good night.
Good night.
got time for this evening, so it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Stop playing with my bust!
Good night, everybody.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy.
You're a what?
A pianist!
Mwah! Good night, everybody.
You have been a delightful audience. So, good night. Thank you.
Oh, my bottom hurts. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Tim Bob.
Oh, I did love that hamster so. I took it into bed with me every night, you know.
Good night, everybody.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think I have to go now. I've been standing here for a very long time. I think the end of the show must have come and gone.
There you go. That's our solar system.
You forgot Uranus.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you for listening. You've been very nice to work to.
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.